to disappoint you, but it'll be more than a few words.
Can you cut it in half?
Thanks very much, Hal, and good morning, everybody. I've been privileged to work with physicians now for over 50 years, and in that time have probably given 1,000 speeches to county, state, and medical and specialty societies, the AMA, and many other organizations. I've always felt honored to do so and to have those opportunities. But never before in those 50 years have I felt as honored as I do today to have this chance to speak with you, the physician movers, shakers, innovators, and builders who not only stand up for a physician's right to practice as he or she desires, but who've also planted the seeds for fostering competition and keeping the private practice of medicine alive and well. And you've helped your patients in the process. All of you have performed a great service to your profession, your patients, and our healthcare system. And you need to know that the Physician Foundation solidly supports your wonderful efforts and commitment, not only in supporting and sponsoring this magnificent meeting, but as you know, several board members are here. A few more will be here later on. They've all traveled here from various distances to offer their support. Of course, none of you is a stranger to politics, and you have had to battle government political ineptitudes in order to gain momentum for the DPC movement. Docs for Patient Care President Lee Gross and founder Hal Schurz can tell us more about that. Since I was born of the Jurassic period, I can remember way back when government political ineptitudes were at their best, or should I say at their worst. With the midterm elections coming up this Tuesday, I was reminded of a few of them. During the 1972 presidential election, it was an October night in Youngstown, Ohio, when vice presidential candidate on the Democratic ticket, Sergeant Shriver, was addressing a large group of steelworkers. After his speech, he invited them to join him at the bar next door for a libation or two. When Shriver got there, the steelworkers were gathered around the bar drinking Boilermakers, as we all know, a shot in the beer. He cut through the crowd and sidled up to the bartender to order a drink. Now, if you're Sergeant Shriver looking to connect with these prospective voters, what drink does he order? Does he have a Boilermaker? What do you think he ordered? What would you have ordered in that situation? Well, Sergeant Man of the People Shriver actually ordered a Courvoisier and a snifter. Reports were that it didn't go over too well. I don't know if that type of ineptitude was one of the reasons why Shriver and George McGovern won a grand total of one state, Massachusetts, in that election, but I'm sure that his being out of touch didn't help. Clearly, Sarge didn't get it, just like the clueless health policymakers who help make your professional lives miserable. But I don't want to be partisan when talking about ineptitude. Let's go back about 4 years later to the Jerry Ford White House in 1976 during this country's bicentennial celebration. It was July 17th. President Ford invited Queen Elizabeth and Prince Philip of England to an elaborate dinner at the White House. Being the good host, the President asked the Queen to join him alone on the dance floor in front of the gathering of dignitaries. A very popular song that summer was ABBA's Dancing Queen, which would have been most appropriate for the occasion. Instead, the band chose a 1937 song. As they began dancing, the White House Orchestra began playing The Lady is a Tramp. The Queen and Prince Philip were not amused. I want to tell you a story that doesn't involve ineptitude, just the opposite. This story tells why every patient in America should want his or her physician free to be able to use their knowledge, independent judgment, years of experience, and even their intuition in treating each patient as a unique person. I probably wouldn't be standing here today if it weren't for the dogged persistence of my dermatologist, Cynthia Hensley of Bonita Springs, Florida, where I live. Almost 6 years ago, she diagnosed a deadly melanoma on the top of my head. The problem was that no lab or even the Mohs surgery would confirm it. However, she insisted that she had made the proper diagnosis. Another negative lab report came in, but still she wouldn't budge. She just knew it was cancer. And then came another lab report, the fourth, from Central Florida, that finally confirmed the diagnosis. My point is that Dr. Hensley's original diagnosis and her refusal to back away from it undoubtedly saved my life. Her steadfast belief in her diagnosis based on her experience did not give in to the lab results which contradicted her. Isn't that what America's patients want in their physicians? Don't we want your independent judgment and extensive medical training to prevail over some general bureaucratic standard? I was taken by how Dr. Jeffrey Singer addressed the issue in a wonderful commentary several years ago in Reason magazine. While all physicians appreciate the development of general approaches to the workup and treatment of various illnesses and disorders, he said, we also realize that everyone is an individual, that every protocol or algorithm is based on the average, typical case. Being pressured into following a predetermined set of protocols inhibits clinical judgment, especially when it comes to atypical problems. It is easy to standardize treatment protocols, he continued, but it is difficult to standardize patients. It seems to me that this is exactly what all of you are saying, and just illustrates again the overall significance of your movement, which accentuates the importance and sanctity of the private patient-physician relationship. I don't know if you've seen the article the Physicians Foundation submitted to Forbes last November. We took exception to an economist who suggested that physician incomes were too high, that they greatly contributed to rising health care costs, and finally, get this, that it is time to break up the doctor cartel. Mr. Economist, asses are made to bear, Shakespeare said, and so are you. His twisted logic reminds me of Willie Nelson's comment. He was upset by the criticism of Lance Armstrong. I think it's just terrible and disgusting, Willie opined, how everyone has treated Lance Armstrong, especially after what he achieved. Imagine winning 7 Tour de France bicycle races while on drugs. Hell, when I was on drugs, I couldn't even find my bike. Best-selling author Malcolm Gladwell had something compelling to say about physicians. I don't understand, given the constraints physicians have in doing their jobs and the paperwork demanded of them, why people want to be physicians. I think we have made it very, very difficult for them to perform their jobs, and I think that's a shame. My principal concern, Gladwell continued, is the amount of time and attention spent worrying about the business side. You don't train someone for all those years of medical school and residency, particularly people who want to help others optimize their physical and psychological health, and then have them run a claims processing operation for insurance companies. Gladwell gets it. To expand on Gladwell's remarks, I would add something that you all know too well, that time motion studies show that for every hour physicians spend with patients, they spend 1 to 2 more finishing their notes, documenting phone calls, ordering tests, reviewing results, prescribing medication, and communicating with their staff. And as they also know so well, very little of this work is reimbursed. As one physician put it so felicitously, instead, this work is done in the interstices of life, as she put it, during time often referred to as work after work, at night, on weekends, and even on vacations. I don't know if any of you remember the revered Pulitzer Prize-winning Chicago columnist Mike Royko, who was a no-nonsense reporter, fair but probing, and very critical of politicians and other groups, but not physicians. He loved physicians. In a column entitled, "Doctors' Pay Poll Reflects a Whiny and Stupid Society," I'm not sure I would have chosen that title myself, but he addressed those who felt that physicians were being paid too much. Maybe the poll question should have been phrased this way, he said. How much should a person earn if he or she must get excellent grades and a fine educational foundation in high school in order to be accepted by a good college and spend 4 years taking courses heavy in math, physics, chemistry, and other lab work and maintain a 3.5 average or better, and spend 4 more years in grinding medical school with a 3rd and 4th years in clinical training, working 80 to 100 hours a week, and put in another 3 to 10 years of postgraduate training, depending on your specialty, and maybe wind up $100,000 in debt, more than $200,000, of course, today. Then work an average of 60 hours a week, with many family doctors putting in 70 hours or more until they retire or fall over. As you probably guessed by now, the Venerable Royko continued, I have considerably more respect for doctors than all of the lawyers and insurance executives called together to remake America's healthcare system. It's wonderful to hear the Malcolm Gladwells and the Mike Roykos, but your critics seem to get more attention with their complaints about physicians. Perhaps they are the ones Ben Franklin was referring to when he said that we are all born ignorant, but one must work hard to remain stupid. There are many physicians who think that their point of view is lost considering the amount of unfair regulations which keep propagating. I call it the Fibber-McGee syndrome. Many of you who are not long in the tooth may not be old enough to remember the Fibber-McGee and Molly show, which ran into the late 1950s. In fact, looking out at this audience, you weren't even alive then, much less tuning in. Unfortunately, I am that old. But that isn't all bad. As Churchill said, I don't have to worry about avoiding temptation. As you grow older, he reminded us, it will avoid you. Fibber-McGee spoke for many physicians describing their experiences in healthcare debates when he complained that my wife and I had words last night, but I never got to use mine. I would echo what many of us feel about our current healthcare system and how it abuses physicians. New technologies such as EHRs and the tyranny of metrics are not designed for physician efficiency. Of course, they never were. Instead, they were designed for medical, legal, government, and insurer convenience. Clearly, there's a great need to improve the functionality and interactivity of EHRs and other IT systems. Our recent Physicians Foundation 2018 physician survey, released 6 weeks ago, revealed that 39% of physicians believe that EHR interoperability is the #1 least satisfying thing about their medical practice. 37.6% replied that it was regulatory insurance requirements, while 37% felt that it was the loss of clinical autonomy. No wonder so many physicians are experiencing professional burnout. In that same Physicians Foundation survey, 78% reported that they had experienced such feelings sometime, often, or always in their practice. Marnie Jameson Carey, CEO of a relatively new and wonderful organization for physicians, the Association of Independent Doctors, brought to my attention a recent and very relevant NYU School of Medicine survey of physicians. You may have seen it. Those physicians in independent practices, which indicated that only 13.5% of respondents said they had experienced burnout. Compare that to national polls, including our own, which show that well over 50% of physicians overall feel it. While the NYU study was a small one, involving 235 physicians in small independent practices, is anyone surprised by the findings? One explanation for the difference is the greater sense of autonomy physicians feel when operating their own practice. All of you can identify with that. And that survey also sends another important message, that medical groups and hospitals should develop more ways to give physicians a greater voice in decision-making. Job satisfaction will go up, and feelings of burnout will undoubtedly go down. But help may be on the way. CMS has announced a new initiative intended to reduce regulatory burdens on physicians, to allow them to spend more time on clinical tasks and with their patients. I've been working with physicians, as I said, for over 50 years now, and I've never before seen such an epiphany. CMS Administrator Seema Verma calls the new initiative Patients Over Paperwork. What a refreshing concept. Can anyone in this room remember when a major government health agency formally sought physician input and recognized politically and publicly that regulatory burdens negatively impact patient care? I don't. Over the past 5 years, CMS has issued about 58 rules annually, and not surprisingly, physicians have voiced frustration over them. You and your colleagues throughout the country have rightfully complained that the burden associated with reporting quality measures outweighs their utility. And now they've actually listened. With all of the political shenanigans going on in Washington, combined with the endless stream of unfair regulations, which do show some signs of abating, it's probably easy for you sometimes to forget the benefits that accrue to you simply because you are a physician. People respect what you did in becoming a physician and why, and they admire you for what you do to heal them. Those are the words of the former Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, Tip O'Neill. Shows you how old I am, who was not exactly a friend of medicine. I was in the Speaker's office when he told us that. Please don't ever forget the respect you command for being a physician. In the wake of so many regulations, burnout, and a hostile practice environment, however, it's probably easy for you to forget sometimes what it means to be a physician. A relevant story of explorer Ernest Shackleton's endurance expedition to the Antarctic 104 years ago comes to mind. Just how important is it to people to be respected? Probably all of you have heard about the expedition, but you may not know about the brutally honest advertisement he placed in the London newspaper to secure a crew and prepare for it. Men wanted for hazardous journey, the ad began. Small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, and safe return doubtful. Sounds like a wonderful opportunity, doesn't it? But honor and recognition given in case of success. Sir Ernest was shocked. He couldn't understand, given all of the negatives and warnings, the overwhelming response to his ad. As he later referred to that call for volunteers, it seemed as though all of the men in Great Britain were determined to accompany me. The response was so great. All this despite the fateful words, safe, return, doubtful. But in examining it further, it really shouldn't have been such a shock to him. Honor or recognition in case of success obviously meant a great deal more to the multitude who volunteered than all of the warnings and the downsides. That's how driven people are to do something worthwhile, to contribute to people's welfare, to be proud of oneself, to do something admirable, to be respected, to be recognized, and to feel important. Everyone wants that, but relatively few actually experience it. And yet, all of that is indigenous to your profession, in being a physician, in helping patients, in feeling that you matter, in being looked up to, and achieving something important. That is what you are. That is what you do. You are trusted physicians, not providers. Insurers and health Insurers and health policy and government bureaucrats have intentionally attempted to diminish your worth by referring to you with that pejorative label. You are not providers. You have never been, nor will you ever be providers. You worked hard to be a physician. You will always be a physician, even long after you've seen your last patient. No one can ever take that away from you. With all of the criticism so unfairly heaped upon physicians by the misinformed and unknowing, I will close with my favorite physician story. It involves a physician who spent 40 years taking care of patients in a place not so far from here, before deciding to do missionary work for 5 years in the twilight of a wonderful career serving others. On the same ship coming home was a famous entertainer who was returning from a 2-week public relations trip to the Far East. When they finally docked in New York, the physician missionary looked out over the rail and saw a huge crowd waiting at the pier, all of them fans of the entertainer. Lord, I don't understand, the physician said. I've given more than 45 years of my life taking care of patients and helping people, and he gave only 2 weeks. And yet there are thousands welcoming him home, and not a single person here to welcome me. And the Lord replied, "Doctor, you're not home yet." Thank you all very much. Thanks. I told Felicia I needed 20.